first time I had to meet the course leader, and the first time I met him, I opened the door and he looked at me with this utter shock of surprise, and these were his actual words. I document in the book. What is someone like you doing in Cardiff University? I keep saying but to people all the time. I still work, and I'm like, oh, open the door somewhere, and they say thanks. I'm like, oh, no problem, but. And I'm like, just call the professor.
Masculinity now is just a massive topic, and figures like Andrew Tate, you got like the Jordan Petersons of the world, countless debates on YouTube all the time about masculinity, the Netflix show Adolescence.
So, you know, all these ideas of being traditional and being a tough man and rejecting education, well, we're living in a world where you can't do these things anymore. They're not acceptable. Or these boys need to get tougher, they need to man up. Well, you're potentially putting these boys in, you put them in a worse position by reinforcing these ideas. Like, I think there's something about those ideas of masculinity changing. So we had these fixed ideas originally that men were supposed to be tough. They went into traditional forms of work, manual labour. But these ideas are getting less so because the traditional role of a man is changing.
Hello YouTube. Welcome back to my channel, Fluck Fights. We got an interesting guest on today. Every podcast says that, don't they? But this guy actually is really interesting because he left school with no GCSEs. He's now sitting here with a PhD. He's a humble guy, that's why I'm the one introducing him like this. Ladies and gentlemen, Richard Gator. Mostly this is going to be about your book, and as part of your PhD, Rich, so the 21st Century Lads you wrote, I'm not going to do the disservice of sort of summarising this book for people, but for anyone who haven't read it, can you sort of give a kind of description about what it is about?
Yeah, so the book focuses on what we call the school-to-work transition in social science or sociological terms, and essentially that refers to people's attitudes towards employment, education, and they kind of transition through education, employment. So, what were they like in school? What do they like in school? What do they dislike? What forms of employment do they want to do? And why do they want to do those? And I guess it looks at those aspects in the context of masculinities. And I notice I said masculinities here rather than masculinity, but I think we'll get into that. And the book focuses on a group of young men from the South Wales Valleys that I refer to as the lads with a Z. And in sociological terms, we talk about them as a marginalised group. And the reason they're referred to as marginalised is because they come from the Alba Valley, which I put in the book, which is recognised, as you know, as a deprived community. So those factors of those disadvantage, that leads to them being disadvantaged, and as we'll talk about, they also have a somewhat negative attitude towards their education. They also want to do manual employment, and they also express what some people call toxic masculinity. We don't use that in gender studies, and again we might get in, but I guess essentially these negative expressions of manhood, to some extent, we'll get into that because the title's continuity and changes, so there is these kind of negative aspects, but there's also good or changes in these young men's behaviour. So that's in a nutshell, or not much of a nutshell, that's what it deals with essentially.
So in your book, as you said there, masculinity is a big factor that is talked about, you talk about, and masculinity now is just a massive topic in it. Worldwide. You got figures like Andrew Tate. I've heard people say that they wish he would go for Parliament because they'd vote for him. You got like the Jordan Petersons of the world, countless debates on YouTube all the time about masculinity, the Netflix show Adolescence, I don't know if you've seen that. Why do you think it is such a massive topic right now in the world, masculinity then?
But I think if we just take us back a bit, Josh, because I think I'll explain why we call it masculinities, and there's some confusion about the idea of gender and masculinity. So essentially people use the idea of sex and gender, they use those terms interchangeably. But if you look at the strict definition and the way they are explained, that's not correct. So when we talk about sex, we're talking about biological factors. And when we're talking about gender or masculinity, we're talking about the way manhood is constructed, or your ideas of masculinity are instructed. So to give people listening or viewing a kind of example, in my day, when young men and young women were brought up, young men were dressed in blue and girls were dressed in pink. And boys played with action figures, girls played with dolls. That wasn't like, that's not applicable to everyone, but in general terms, the place where I come from, the Abbey Valley, that's how, that's what I saw from my childhood. Thankfully, those that changed was that, really similar to you. So what we're saying is, these factors, these social factors, they influence the way you express your ideas of manhood. So again, with school, so there's different school. When I was younger, boys played rugby, girls played netball. And again, we know those have changed now. So that's what we're saying. These social factors, so like your upbringing, your education, the TV and media, they influence your ideas of how you express manhood, essentially. And we know that those ideas are changing, and that's what the book deals with. And so back to your question, why do I think these people are gaining popularity? Well, there's lots of different reasons for that, and again, I don't want to bore the viewers, but I think there's something about those ideas of masculinity are changing. So we had these fixed ideas originally that men were supposed to be tough. They went into traditional forms of work, manual labor, but these ideas are getting less so because the traditional role of a man is changing. So I just think there's this state of, not confusion, but there's this state of transition where these young men are getting caught up, and these people like, as you mentioned, like Jordan Peterson, essentially, and others, they offer these simplistic ideas of being a man, and I think, in that state of confusion, some people are easily drawn to that because it offers you kind of, an easy place to go. And I think, like, just to add to that as well, it's called Masculinities. Again, I probably didn't explain this very well, but, so we say there's different forms of masculinity based on those different factors. So, like similar to yourself, maybe, when you're around middle class people, when you're from the valleys, they don't express their ideas of manhood the same way that I do. When I talk to people in Cardiff University about my ways of growing up, they look at me as if I'm from another planet. Do you mean? So, that's what we're talking about. That these, people think, masculinity, being a man is just one thing, but it's not. If you compare yourself to others, do people act the same as you?
I thought it was good that for the Observer, they called you, what was it, neurotypical academic? And it is true, because you won't be offended. Like, you don't sound your accent as clever as you write. If that makes sense. People might say you might be rough around the edges or whatever. But before I get my head caved in, what was it like for you though? Like, which you would admit, neurotypical academic, going then into university, higher education. I think you're absolutely right, but I think that reflects my connection to the community and wanting to stay true to who I was and who I am, and the significance I place on my friendship, my family. I don't want to become out of my station, but then that presents difficulties when you go to university, because especially at Cardiff University, the majority of people here are from a middle class background. I've heard a Valley's accent once in my time at Cardiff University, and I've been here like 5 or 6 years once. That's not even a lie. And that's how sad it is that I was so chuffed that you're in a Valley's accent. That represents how bad it is. So it's difficult. I keep saying but to people all the time. I still work, and I'm like, open the door somewhere, and they say thanks. I'm no problem, but and I'm like, just call the professor. The cleaner, is it?
But I think you're right what you said. As a backhand compliment, I do like to think my writing is not the same way as I talk, but the way I talk is because I'm still deeply embedded in that community that I come from, and I care about, and I care about the people in it. So it's what we call code switching. So you switch from one personality to another. So I think a good example the viewers might like is that I was writing a essay one day, as you do as an academic, and I had a WhatsApp message on the group. So I'm in academic mode, and I wrote something on the WhatsApp group that was kind of slightly academic. I didn't think it was, and I don't know, you might like to delete this out, but one of the boys said, if you ever fucking put a word like that in our group again, we'll kick you out.
know.
It's just those difficulties walking from one way to the other.
No, that's funny actually, because again, even with us, like we got like a football group chat, and I think there might be one of the boys there who went to university, and straight away, like you can just pick up sometimes the differences. Whereas you said there, you might just say the odd word from that kind of, and everyone's like, "Oh, fuck off, you posh bastard." Because where we're from, no one goes to university.
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, fuck off, he's known as the posh bastard in the group," like.
Yeah.
But was it like a turning point for you then? Basically leaving school, like we keep saying, no GCSEs. You know, people call them dead end jobs, but working dead end jobs. How did you then, like, what was the journey basically to where you are now?
Yeah, I think I love you being associated with that term dead end, right? I don't like specifically saying in the book. It's not something that I use, that I associate with, because I don't. I just want to make that clear to the viewers, because I don't think everyone wants a career progression. Not everyone wants fancy jobs and lots of money. So I think my turning point was, Josh, I got to 32 and I'd done all these jobs and there was no progress, and there's a little amount of money. You know, I was working at the concrete factory at one point, and I had to work from 6 in the morning to 6 at night to make sure I paid for my rent, and I had like £50 left at the end of the week. I got a bit ill from it as well, and I just thought, like, and I had a bit of a moment in my life, and I was just like, my life's going nowhere. Like, is this how I'm going to spend the rest of my life? And I'd also worked in the park, and I'd worked with young people in the park, and I had a good relationship with them, and I thought, you know what, let's go and give youth work a try. Like, what have I got to lose? Like, maybe I can prevent these young men from going into a life that I had, but also I'd have to go back to education to do it. But I'd already failed at education, so if I failed again, what's everyone going to say? Oh, so what? We knew he was an idiot anyway. So and I think when I went back to education, everyone laughed. Like, they were like, "Do you remember your youthful years, like, in education?" And I was just like, "Well, what have we got to lose?" So that was the kind of catalyst, I suppose, for me going back.
Do you, like, especially when you first went into university, do you feel as well like a bit of an outsider? Like, did you almost, like, maybe the opposite of, like, a lot of people in university might have been in school and maybe been a bit not socially the same as, say, some of the cooler kids, but then when you went to university, did you find that kind of flip? Was you kind of like, what am I doing here, kind of thing? Or did you feel like people were almost saying to you, looking at you like, what's this guy fucking doing?
Well, I could give you an example. These are the examples, and this is the difficulties of us people from our backwards go into education. So and I hope this doesn't come across as kind of arrogant or up my own ass, but I'd done extremely well as an undergrad in the University of South Wales, and people said to me, because it's seen as a lesser university than Cardiff, so I was like, people kept saying, "Oh, so what? You've got good grades in University of South Wales. You wouldn't be able to cut through at Cardiff." And I was just like, "Well, no. I'll go and prove that I can do it in Cardiff." So I went to Cardiff as transferred as an undergrad, and the first time I had to meet the course leader, and the first time I met him, I opened the door and he looked at me with this utter shock of surprise, and these were his actual words. I document in the book. "What is someone like you doing in Cardiff University? We don't normally see people like you." I was like, "Oh, it's like that, is it? All right, I'm off back to University of South Wales." Like, so there's a term we use in academia about feeling like an imposter, as if you don't fit in it, like, so and I'm still riddled with that, Josh, when you're talking to top professors who use big terminology easily in their everyday dialogue, like this, it's difficult. So it's difficult. It's a difficult experience, to be honest.
I can imagine, but like, in your book you called it insider status, didn't you, where basically you feel like your youth was sort of similar to the lads. We say lads, don't we? Because that's what you refer to. In your book, the lads that you've sort of done your research on. But what was it like for you then, having that sort of, as you said, insider status, and then in collaboration, being at the youth centre as well? Was it like a mix-up of trying to maybe like get on side with these lads, but also you're trying to do your research as well,
it was, that inside status is really difficult, like, because I'm not going to get into it, but there's like loads of like different debates in academia about why it's positive, why it's negative, and I always tried to get away from it, because I just felt it was kind of, arrogant or kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It's kind of imposing yourself on the research, like inflating yourself, and and I never wanted to do it, and my supervisor encouraged me to do it, because what she said was most people that focus on these marginalised groups, these young men, have come from a traditional middle class, normal educational trajectory, so they've gone straight from school to university. No one has looked at these young men with a similar background to them. So I was encouraged to use it, but it also brought up, like, as I talked in the book, psychological and emotional difficulties, because when I was looking at them, I was reflecting on my past and the things that I did, and I was just like, you just wasted your youthful years. Like, where could you be now if you had, engaged in education? It was really difficult, but also extremely beneficial for me in lots of ways, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a bit. So
because there was one part of the book, I don't know, well, it's in the book, so I'm sure you can talk about it, but there's one part of the book where you said, I think it was Stan, was it? Where you had to, basically, in better phrase, kick him out. For people who haven't, read that story yet.
Yeah, so Stan is probably one of the most, as you've read, is probably one of the most formidable figures in the book. He's kind of the leader of the lads, or it comes across as the leader of the lads, and he's very dominant, and he expresses those kind of negative ideas, or that toxic ideas of masculinity. So he's well known to the police, for smashing up shops, and all these kind of behaviours, negative behaviours. And so he's playing pool in the room, and he comes in, and one of the youngsters is playing pool. Two youngsters, are playing pool. And they happily playing pool, so Stan bounces in the room, like shoulders go in as you do. And he says, I want to go. And I say, Stan, let these boys play, and you can have a turn in. And he said, fuck you, Rich, it's my turn now. So he snatches the cue off the boy and starts hitting pool balls around the table, and these balls are flying everywhere now. And I'm like, oh God, what am I going to do here? Because I'm a researcher in this youth setting. I'm not really a youth worker. I was kind of moulded into that role, or had to go into that role because of the youth centres facing difficulties. But because of the youth worker role, I had to sanction his behaviour, or make sure he didn't hurt others. So I'm like, right now he's doing this, I'm going to have to tell him to stop. And so I tell him, and he tells me to fuck off again, and then we work on a 2-strike rule. So eventually I had to tell him to leave, and I'm sat there after telling him to leave, knowing that he might not engage in my research anymore, but he was highly important to it. Like, a lot of not lots of the data, but some of the data, good data, comes from him. So it's just really difficult, of working with these young lads. And I just want to say, these young men have experienced difficulties themselves as well. Like my book hopefully comes across it. I don't throw them under the bus. I like to think I'm quite objective in my view. I talk about the negative ideas, but I also talk about what's positive about them.
Yeah, I think that's why it's good. Why, like you said, you had that sort of insider status, because I think if someone from maybe a middle class background would kind of throw them under the bus, oh, this is just the bottom of the whatever you call it, the human race, basically. It's like, but I agree with you saying there. But
a lot of people in gender studies, when they focus on this group, they just focus on the negative side of these young men, and I understand why that's done, because these behaviours these young men express, they're negative for themselves and society. But I guess my counter argument to that is, we already know those ideas. How do you help these young men in society without looking for positives in them? So
But it was interesting as well, where you said that, again, you keep going back to it, insider status, but where you felt then, when Stan sort of rejected you, said, "Oh, fuck off, Rich." It's like the fact, am I now really seen as one of them?
Thank you for that, because I like that in the book, because I through my journey, and I continue to kind of try and shy away from that. It'd be easy to go into Cardiff University and kind of absorb being middle class and kind of lose who you are, because it would make my life a lot easier. Like, people would probably respect me a bit more if I talk with a fancy language at that university. But then people wouldn't respect me. The people I cared about deeply wouldn't respect me, and so it's difficult. And I thought what I'm going back to is that reflection I had about Stan was essentially, have I become that person that I always didn't want to be? Have I become that middle class academic? Is that why Stan has told me to fuck off and doesn't respect me because he doesn't see me as being him?
Yeah, I get what you mean. Yeah. I can imagine that was difficult.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm going to go into now, actually. So, like, you talk about in the book, your youth, like, similar to the lads. I feel like your youth was more similar to the lads than mine, because I didn't so much get involved with, like, to be fair, I was terrified of my mother for one. So, like, I didn't get involved with, like, drug taking or early drinking, even antisocial behaviour. It was just like football, basically, which got me nowhere, apart from having dodgy knees in my 30s, early 30s. But I guess what I'm saying is, your youth was, I think, actually, this is my sort of mad take on it. I feel like, right, it's like, when I was growing up, it was like 3 different categories of like young men, I'd say, boys. You had like the cool hard kids, right, at the top, like sit at the back of the bus, they'd be intimidating, right? And then like at the bottom, we'd call them geeks, nerds. They'd be like number 3, I'd say, right? But they might not be socially, they might be antisocial even in school, struggle a bit, but then they probably like brain surgeons or whatever. And then I was like in the middle, so basically the worst of the both, because I wasn't quite switched on enough to, or probably even clever enough to be like the geek or the nerd, and I wasn't confident or cool or hard enough to be like the cool hard kids. So basically like in-betweeners, basically like literally the in-betweeners, the program. That was basically our friendship group. But I think from reading your book, you were like more of the top, like the cooler, harder kids, you know, because what is this square boys thing that you talked about in your group, the square boys?
So I don't know if I was cool or I'm certainly not sure I was hard, but yeah, like, I guess like, because I wasn't good at football, like, you know, when we're talking about...
I wasn't.
But yeah, I wasn't good at football, I wasn't good at sport, you know, because as I know now, I suffer from dyslexia and dyspraxia, so, and you know, when you're at that age, you want to be cool, don't you? You want like people to look do certain ways, so you have to do certain things, whether that's sport or whether that's engaged, you know, academic achievement. And I guess my avenue was, and for similar to other young men in that community, was taking drugs. It was getting into, you know, antisocial behaviour, you know, because in some ways those behaviours were looked at as cool, like you know, like, so that was my avenue for, and like for me, when you talk about the square boys, you know, they were for the people who don't know them, I know lots of people from Hampshire who will know them. They were a group of young men who sat on the pancake wall, and you know, and for me, you know, they were the boys that we looked up to. And I've talked to, I won't mention names, but I've talked to other boys who were my generation, and they also looked up to them. Like we wanted to be a square boy, you know. They pulled the women, people revered them, like, and it was just like, well, I can't be good at education, I can't, you know, I'm no good at sport, so you know, maybe I could be a square boy. So I was like a square boy wannabe, like, do you know what I mean? Like, but for me, they're like, those boys, the square boys, have still got respect, I think, in some ways, among my generation. So, yeah, that's where that come from. And I think you made an interesting point as well, John. I'd like to pick up on that. When we talk about masculinities as well, there's not just differences within between social classes. There's differences within a specific class. So when we're talking about working class, you were exactly right. Yeah. So you could have like working class people who are good at education. You could have working class people who are SWATs, and then you'd have the marginalised group. So there's people in my field that look at like the different groups. I just want to focus on this one particular group. These ideas of manhood are different within social classes as well.
SWATs, that was a word. That was SWATs, I remember one of the boys, right, he actually came in and he said, who's done their homework then? SWATs. Almost like intimidating you. It was like, you've done your homework. I'm like, no, I haven't done my homework. No.
That's what we call in gender studies, that gender policing. So it's the way of making you conform to certain ideas of manhood. Like, so it's like, because schoolwork is seen as a feminine practice, or historically is seen as a feminine practice, by using those what we call gender policing techniques or certain words, it causes you to conform to a certain idea of manhood. So that's what those words are used for. Like.
I get you. But the square boys, I think You're a bit older than me, anyway. But I remember.
Yeah, a lot older probably.
No, I remember though, like, because it's a generational thing. So even though you might be older than me, that people were still being a square by then. Because I used to live literally on 3 High Street, Abertrudo, so I'd have to like walk past them every time, and yeah, it was like intimidating. Like, but yeah. So I think you probably grew up the years you're on about, probably what, late 90s, would you say?
Yeah, so my teenage years are spent from in the 90s, like so I 90, I would have been 10 through to 2000s, like
yeah. With me it was more probably like mid 2000s, early 2000s as well. Yeah, fair enough. But our youths are similar in the way that even though you're a lot older than me, but no, like, so the thing that I picked up on in this book that I was shocked at is like the behaviours of these lads and the fact that they were hugging each other for one. So I'll let you get into that in a minute. But basically for us, like you said in the book, growing up, the only greeting we'd really have was this, wasn't it? Right, bud?
Yeah.
Or maybe that one. It was like, what's happening, right, or what? There was no touching. There wasn't even any like fist bumps or anything back then, was it? It was nothing.
No.
But then what you've seen is fucking...
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, Josh, it blew my mind, to be honest. Like, I'm glad you say this, right? Because like, there were parts on my PhD, like I actually felt like I was losing my mind, right? And I like get into it a bit now. I know I go off topic a bit, but like... like you said, like this is exactly what I documented. When I was growing up, you just nodded your head, and it was like, well, it wasn't. Well, for me, what I talked about, it was all right, but, and if you wanted to come across a bit more masculine, you go, all right, but, nod your head. Yeah. I don't even remember shaking people's hands and that fist pump, like you said. No. So these group of boys, I'm watching them in the youth centre now, and as I said, they're on first name terms with the police. They engage in antisocial behaviour. Some of them engage in drug taking. They're rejecting school. They're a typical reflection of what I was and my behaviours. And so I'm sat in the youth centre now, and this boy comes in. He's a prominent member of the group, one of the lads, and he comes in from after school or work, wherever he is, and he walks into this room. This youth centre full of girls, boys, and he comes out and he goes, "All right, bro," and he hugs him, and I was just like, what the fuck is happening here? Like, he just hugged another guy in front of, like, and I know some viewers will say, well, I hug my friends now, and yeah, I hug my friends, but what you've got to understand is, if you're a grown adult, your ideas of masculinity and the way people look at you are formed, so people are not going to, like, question your identity and who you are.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually, yeah, because like you said, as you get older, you start to hug your friends.
Yeah, but like when you're younger, or certainly when I was younger, your sexuality would have been questionable. So, and the very fact that your sexuality would be in question would have potentially, sad as it sounds to some people out there, would have potentially ostracised you in our community, because, being gay was frowned upon in that community, or by certain people in that era. Thankfully, we're getting more welcome and open to this, but like, so yeah, it just absolutely blew my mind. I was just like, at one point I thought, are they doing this for my purpose? Like, because it just seemed, it was alien to everything that I knew as a young man. So, I asked them about it. Why are you hugging each other? What's that about? Like, and they just explained to me that, like, this is what people do these days. Football players hug each other. We don't do it like you used to do it. We don't shake hands anymore, like.
Yeah, but then it's mad because footballers have always hugged each other, haven't they? Yeah. But we never copied that growing up, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like you said, the long word was ostracised or whatever. You always felt like growing up in the Abba Valley, you were like one bad move away from that, didn't you? So if you went up and hugged your friend or whatever, it was like, do you know what I mean? You're always worrying about how you look, because like you said, how masculine you might look or whatever. Because another thing then was that they, as we would put it, hanging around with girls.
Yeah.
Again, for me, growing up, I remember one time we were all out as a group of boys, and I had to walk home, and this girl was walking home with me at the same time. And I purposely let her walk in front because I didn't want to be seen walking home with a girl. And it was like, she could be my girlfriend, but guess what? That would have been seen as gay. Work that one out, having a girlfriend. You didn't hang around with girls, did you? You just didn't, like. But then again, and the lads in the book, as you said.
Yeah, I love it when people tell me these things as well, because like when I was doing this research, I was like, oh, have you like like, have you forgotten what your youth was? Like, have you got some misinterpretation of what your youthful years were? Like, because then, you know, but then when people like you, when I speak to people like you, they reconfirm, you know, my ideas. Because when I was growing up, we didn't hang around with girls. I did partially because some of the girls were integrated into the Square Boys group, but generally everyone I knew, there was groups of boys who hung around together, and there were groups of girls. You know, they were different. There were different variations somewhat, but that was what the general thing was. And again, I talk about the book. We had this thing among us lot. It was called the 9 o'clock club, right? So if you had a girlfriend, it was acceptable for you to leave the boys at 9 o'clock. Like, you get ridiculed as you walked off with her. Right? But there was like there was kind of like this rule that like 9 o'clock was the time you was allowed to leave. Like so,
That's again similar, because I remember like it was one of the boys, and this was when we were quite a bit older as well, so probably like coming young adults, got himself a girlfriend, and we were playing football all the time, again like I said earlier, but he'd always bring his girlfriend, and we were just like, what are you doing? Like, it was just awkward again, just because we just weren't used to being around girls. But it's interesting, to be fair, like I said, the lads in your book are mixing with girls, and you know.
I didn't really explain about the lads, so they were mixing with girls, like they were like integrated friendship group, and there was a point, like, again, this amazed me. So there was a point in the pool room where they were all in there, all these girls together and all these boys, like, and they just having this, you know, normal dialogue. It wasn't like sexual talk or anything. They weren't trying to, you know, get onto each other. So I said to myself, do you hang around with each other out, you know, every day, you know, outside the centre? Because I thought that the confines of the centre made them hang about together. And this girl looks at me with like biggest shock on her face, as if I'm the most stupidest person in the world, and says, "Of course we do." And I was just like, right, okay, I don't understand these people, but I equally really understand them as well. Like, so.
Yeah, no, I would have been the same, like, because like you said, but all right, then the last thing then, behaviour type or whatever, what even is this, right, was, I'll let you explain this, the spitting.
Okay.
What the hell was that about?
Yeah, so the opening scene in the book talks about how these boys I heard a laughter from the outside. I'm standing at the front door of the youth centre, and I heard laughter at the outside. And it's early on in my research, so I think, like, what's going on out there? This sounds like they're having fun. Yeah. So I go outside now, and these boys are chasing each other around the car, and I hear this big retching noise from one of them, and he's like obviously drawing phlegm up from the back of his throat, the nasal passage, and he runs up the other one and spits in his face. And I was just like, wow. And like, I don't know about you, Josh, but in my day, if you spat in another man's face, it was considered the height of disrespect. Like,
it's worse than punching.
Yeah, that's how I see it. Like, but this boy just laughs at him and like, as if it's fun. And I was just like, what the hell is going on here? Like, that's exactly, again, I'm going to keep repeating it. That's, you know, I like hearing these things you say, because that's how I document it. Like, that for me, it was worse to be spitted on in my day than it was to be punched. And I think a lot of people still feel that way. But for these boys, it was a source of fun. Like, I was just like, but then equally, these boys are smashing up shops and getting into fights. I was just like, how does this work? How does this?
It's strange, yeah.
Yeah.
Because it would have been more like so. Like you said, embarrassing, because I remember sometimes some of the boys used to be on the double-decker bus, used to lean over the top out the windows as you were going off and spit at you from. But even that, I suppose that's similar, but not actually willingly letting someone spit in your face. It's like, you know, at the end of this interview, I'll shake your hand. I'm not going to lean across the table and spit in your fucking face. Might be a viral video, isn't it? But, you know, it's mad. It is mad. Like, but, actually, one more thing. Going back to... like you said, the Square Boys and that, and you used to get other girls. Have you got any idea why the young girls are more sort of attracted to these sort of Square Boys, whereas with us, like, we were like the losers playing football in a corner, or we were maybe not even the Swats wouldn't get the girls either? Like, you know?
Yeah, I suppose because well, traditionally, again, you've in essence, you've just explained the ideas of masculinity, because society has traditionally reinforced that those are the ideas of being a man, being strong, being hard, being stoic, being tough. So, you know, that's potentially why girls gravitate towards, or did historically gravitate towards, those men, because that's how you were supposed to be as a man. Like, and some people still believe that that's how you still should be, and they, you know, and those they exemplified those kind of ideas, I suppose. So yeah, I would argue that's why.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that makes sense. But yeah, moving on then, Rich.
Yeah.
Education. So you went back. I might be butchering the name of this other study. Is it Willis's study or whatever?
Yeah, Paul Willis. Yeah.
But basically, that he looked into what marginalised young men as well.
Yeah.
And basically, these men in that study they just rejected education almost completely.
Yeah.
But again, it was interesting that you said that these lads in this book slightly different.
Yeah. You've definitely read the book. It's good to see. It's good to see.
Yeah, I do my research. Anyone who comes on here, I do my research.
So Paul Willis, and his book's called Learning to Labour, and it's probably one of the most highly acclaimed sociological books. Yeah. So his book, called Learning to Labour, he focuses on these marginalised young men, which he calls the lads with an S. That's why I specifically use the Z. So it makes it easier to move between the two categories. But yeah, he looks at these young men, and in a similar way, these are working class young men. They have had a working class upbringing in the 70s, on the cusp of deindustrialisation when we're losing manual work. And he talks about how they're raised by their fathers. Their fathers have a big influence on them. They inherit this kind of masculinity that causes them to see paperwork as feminine, or pushing pens as feminine, and how they should do masculine forms of work, manual labour. So they essentially don't see, and they kind of know that they don't need education to go into manual work, and because at the time there was not abundance of manual work, but there was a lot more opportunities than there is now. They rejected education. But I guess, and this asks back to the fact that I'm trying to have a look at the positive points of the lads. The lads don't entirely reject education. They adopt what I call a pragmatic approach to education. So they selectively engage with the topics that they think are relevant to going to college. Yeah. So maybe give you an example. The one talks about how he wouldn't go to history or religious studies because he doesn't see that as necessary to go to college or for his future employment. But he talks about how maths is relevant. So he says, like, if I went on a shop with a fiver, I'd need to know, or 10, I'd need to know, when I bought something, I'd need to know maths because I need to know if the change was right.
Right, yeah.
To go into college, I need 3 GCSEs. So there's some positive, there's some positive changes in these young men, but there's equally, when you reduce yourself to 3 GCSEs, you kind of, you're shortening your chances. If you're the entry level is 3 GCSEs and you're only engaging in 3 topics, if you don't hit one of those topics, you're not going to college.
I was just literally thinking now, actually, that I'm going to make a point again that you're older than me, but I feel like maybe I'm in the middle then of like this older research and the newer one, which is interesting because, to be fair, I think it was similar when I was growing up. I don't know about you, the boys, even from Aberystwyth, they didn't completely reject education for me. I feel like they were almost a bit like, they maybe try and focus on something, but then there was always, again, like, even like I've got people in my family say, oh, don't worry about school, focus on a trade.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because school don't teach you anything. But that is interesting. But again, going back to my education, and I messaged you as soon as I read the book, because one of the big reasons I wanted to do this podcast, because it made me think then about my education, and like the stuff I'm doing now is just a hobby at the minute, but it's like media. I've always liked art. Art to me is like everything, art, media, music. But in school, I didn't choose to study any of it. Yeah. And it's like, and then it made me think, it's like, did I even I don't think I actually actively thought it, but was it like a subconscious thing as like, those were seen as more feminine, again, growing up in the Aber Valley on High Street, it's like, no, why were you going to go and do art for? It's like, there's no one, like now, to be fair, you look at media and it's like, there's YouTube, but there wasn't really any like back then, there was no role models. Going back to it, I do happen to think that it was definitely, even if it was just a bit of subconscious rejection towards that type of work, like, but Matt, funny enough then, I went into sixth form, and again, as you maybe grow up, you become a bit more comfortable. Then I took media, right? But it was too late because I hadn't studied already, and yet I was still being stupid because maybe it was the fact that there was no role models around. I did media, right, and the right at the end, of the whole year, there was an exam, and it was about The Dark Knight. Have you seen that film?
Oh yeah, I do actually like that film. That's
Well,
a good film, yeah.
I do now. But so anyway, but I went into this exam and I didn't even watch The Dark Knight. So it shows how much I rejected it. Do you know what I mean? How stupid that is, how lazy it is. But yeah. And now, as I've got older, you grow up, don't you? And you appreciate the art that goes into it, the directing, the acting, everything into that film, The Dark Knight. And I got a U in media, which you know is basically don't turn up. Why even bother turning up? I'm sitting there trying to like guess what the film's about, and I'm thinking he's like a knight on a horse just writing shit like done. But yeah. Basically, your book really did make me think about. I went back. I was like, why didn't I focus on these things, like, you know?
Yeah, we in gender studies we'd say there's certain topics that are seen as masculine, certain subjects that are not. So if you have a look at STEM subjects, science, technology, engineering, I think it is, maths. If you look at those subjects, they predominantly or have been historically male-dominated subjects, and forms of employment that is changing now, through initiatives to try and get more women into it. But so again, it is, and those, when you're talking about art, you're talking about others, like we're talking about English, we're talking about the kind of the link to humanities, and they're considered softer subject rather than hard sciences. So they've got, even the fact they're called softer subjects has got connotations of not being, they're not being masculine, isn't it? So I would imagine you would have subconsciously, would have been, dealing with those ideas of, how would you be, how would people view you if you did those topics. So I just rejected everything outright.
Well, I mean, no one who from Abbotsford or singing study art or drama, do you know what I mean? You just didn't, did they?
Back in my day, if you studied that, your sexuality would have been questionable, I think. Do you mean? Or you would have been seen as odd, do you mean?
Exactly, that's it, Funny enough, actually, I will ask something, because it's probably the same answer, but me and my mate were talking the other day, and we were like, I can't remember why we got onto it, but he said, I think it was, there's 3 of us in a group, me and my brother, my mate. He said, I think I've got the most masculine brain out of the 3 of us. And this was before I read your book and everything. I was thinking, that's actually, I was like, is he? So I get triggered, and I was like, how have you got a more masculine brain than me? And he said, because I do DIY, you put the tally up for me. He's like, I can do DIY, the things I'm good at that are more masculine. He's like, is that really? Do you know what I mean?
About kind of, the thing.
Even that, it's like, as you get older, there's still all these different, feelings and traditional masculine. But do you think as well, actually, that's one last thing I want to ask about that. Do you think you said in your book, do you think it's to do with going back all the way to your parents would work in the coal mines? And, do you think it stems from that traditional sense of...
Well, when we're talking about kind of the ideas of how you understand, or how masculinity is socially constructed, we talk about how these different influences. We talk about the process of, I don't want to use these terms of socialization. So how certain influences, in life influences, kind of determine how you envision the world or your ideas of manhood. And parents are like one of the the major factors in that. And so when I was growing up, my father was a carpenter, and so the obvious choice for me was employment was being a carpenter. I wanted to be like my dad. So and I think that's one of the interesting findings with in relation to the young men, the lads' employment, is a lot of them do want to do manual labour as well, and and that's because of their family, their parents are in manual labour. But I also talk about this rupturing process, or these changing ideas, where one of the young men wants to be a chef, and I don't know about you, but that would have been frowned upon in my day as well. But the positive thing was, there's Nan brought him up, and she had a positive influence on him, and so he had a different career aspiration. And my work comes across negatively. There's nothing wrong with going into the building trade. It's just that these young men had restricted ideas about employment. They just want to do manual work. So, and the likelihood was, they wouldn't get education, the education to be able to go on to those courses. So I was talking about how we need to widen these young men's career aspirations and give them better choices, because I think they might engage, they might lead to an increased engagement with education.
That's reminded me now, really interesting, I think it's a powerful part of your book as well, was one of the boys, and he said that I remember at the start reading it, and he said that he said he wanted to be a funeral director.
Yeah.
I was thinking, who the hell from Abertuddos and as a marginalised young man, who wants to be a funeral director? It's quite rare, isn't it? And when you said why, that basically was his auntie was ill for ages, she died, and when he's seen her then, when she was dead, that she looked better than she had for years, and now left a lasting impression on him. That was powerful to be. Just shows, like that just backs up your point, basically.
The influence on him and stuff. So that's right. I guess that's what the book tries to talk about. It talks about how these young men have got these traditional ideas of, but also they've got these positive ideas. The positive ideas of manhood, and there's certain influences that influence them. And I guess I talk about this idea. I call it amalgamated masculinities, where these like traditional ideas of masculinity and these new positive or progressive ideas of masculinity, they fuse together to create this new version of manhood. And I talk about how we can potentially foster those positive ideas, because I guess one of the things that I don't dislike, but in the Valley, I don't know about you, with like people talk about it's not what you know, it's who you know, and they've got some people have still got a negative view on education and university. And I think people are sometimes a bit detached from the way the world is changing. So if you look at the way the employment is going, like manual employment is declining, and we've seen the increase of AI and technology in the workplace, and we've seen an increased need for softer skills. And equally, you can no longer do what I did, so you can't entirely reject education and go to college. You have to have some educational background. So all these ideas of being traditional and being a tough man and rejecting education, we're living in a world where you can't do these things anymore. They're not acceptable. So you people in the community, they trying to reinforce these ideas. Oh, these boys need to get tougher, they need to man up. Well, you're potentially putting these boys in you put them in a worse position by reinforcing these ideas. I probably went off on one end, but
I like it.
I'm just passionate about these places and these people, Oh,
it's brilliant, right? But what do you think can be done then to help them? Like, basically, obviously you need role models, that's one thing you've said. What do you think could be done to help these men from basically being sold on a river of, like you said, become these masculine, go for these masculine job roles?
I just think we need to change attitudes towards employment in that area. As I said, you can no longer reject education. You can't just simply walk out to school. I see some of the lads now, and I'm not going to lie, it breaks my heart, because they had potential to do something in education. They weren't totally negative, and I see them now, and they're unemployed. We talked, this was done 4 or 5 years ago, so they're 19, 20 now. But at that point where I was working with them, we had the potential to intervene and do something with them, because they didn't reject education. They didn't have really negative attitudes to manhood. They had increased employment aspirations. But so for me, you have to try and you work with those positive ideas. I just think that there's this way there to enhance increase the ideas towards what is work. Can different enable them to go into different sectors and different employment. So I said those softer skills, these young men, they showed softer skills, they're hugging each other, they're compassionate, they show empathy, all these qualities that you're going to need in the future. So we could use them rather than how do we foster them? And I'm sure someone will be shouting at me on here now saying, oh, we need tough boys, we need, and all these boys that I know that keep saying, oh, these boys need to man up, they need to get tough. There's some of the people that I know that are most negatively affected by gender. These are boys who suffer from mental health. They're reinforcing these ideas by saying, oh, these boys need to, toughen up. We need tough men again.
It's still, especially where we're from, is massively, like you said, call centre work, again, that would be softer kind of skills,
But these boys, Josh, they won't do call centre work. So this is one thing that's known about this group, and that's what I talk about in here, that they won't do call centre work, and they show what we've seen in the data before. So they talk about maybe it's the same for you, and I would think I would have been the same. So they purposely say, if I'm on the phone and someone starts questioning me, tells me they want something off me, or they start shouting at me, I'll just tell them to fuck off, because I'm not taking. I think one of the boys says, I don't take shit off anybody, So they're not able to do those jobs. They haven't got those what we call emotional labour, we call it in sociology. Right. So the ability to show softer skills, to take shit off people, for want of a better word. Yeah. They're not willing to do that. That masculinity in them, doesn't allow them to kind of. It's like, whoa, I'm not,
Yeah, it's like again in school. Say, the harder kids. Yeah. If they had a bollocking off a teacher, they'd always have to try and show the class that they can have a pop back kind of thing.
Yeah. You can't lose face in front of your mates.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, all right then, Rich. Last thing then. So, how many years ago did you complete this PhD? Is it?
I think it's possibly started 6 years ago. So finished it about 2, maybe 3, going on 3 years ago now.
So have you seen any of the boys now? How are they doing now, years on?
Yeah, I have seen some of the lads about me, and I have talked to them, Josh. And it saddens me to see, because as I said, I don't like the term dead end jobs, but they are in jobs that are unskilled forms of employment that haven't got opportunities for career progression. I would imagine that not well paid. So yeah, it saddens me, and I almost think they failed them somewhat, Josh, because there's me. I've done my PhD, and I don't want to sound up my ass, but I've done well since my PhD. These boys are part of my research, and they haven't done as well in life as they should have, because they showed signs that they were willing to engage in education. They had career aspirations. They showed signs of those positive masculinities. They had lots of, despite those negative aspects, they had these positive signs in them. And yeah, I just think it really saddens me. I think we've let them down somewhat. I think people in policy, people in government, people making decisions about my community have let them down. We're stripping away resources from my community. We've talked about removing a library from my community, an educational resource now, Josh, in a community where I think 27% of people haven't got no education. And not only have they
remove a library,
and not only have these people not got education, they got a lack of disposable funding. So how are you able to travel to other areas if you haven't got money to commute there?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I mean, obviously, funny enough, I'm not plugging another video, but I spoke to the leader of the council on it, and he didn't completely reject the idea that the Aber Valley was basically deprived, but he was sort of trying to push back on that. And to me, there's no way around that it is, because even growing up for me, we'd go out, as I said, we'd go to play football, and you finish school at you get home 3:30, and then it's dark by 4:15. Why can't I just put some lights up around?
Absolutely.
Like you said, it's worse now, the fact that they're stripping libraries out of Abertrudo. All we got now is the YM, which again is completely underfunded. I don't know whether that's meant to be funded or whatever, but if it is, well, there we go. But yeah, again, in Caerphilly now, they've got a library, and new gym coming. It's just down the road,
So I said, we're stripping away resources from these communities, and I seen James' interview, and I thought he came across really well, to be fair to him. But I make no disguise that that I am, very annoyed about the idea of stripping away. So I think the interesting thing for me is that it contradicts. So the Welsh government, Labour government, who these people represent, have got an idea of lifelong learning and upskilling. Surely removing a library contradicts the idea of lifelong learning. Yeah, we talked about how people in this deprived area, and it is one of the most deprived, Josh. If you look at the Welsh index of multiple deprivation, there's pockets in the Aber Valley that rank among the most deprived in Wales, and I think it's about 27%. I need to look at the statistics again. I think I'm about right. Got no educational attainment, which is massively different to the UK, percentage. So I just think that these boys need help, because this is a deprived area, there's a lack of opportunities there anyway. So we don't do more from them. What you're going to see is increased deprivation and increased inequality in that area. So and those ideas of they pass through generations, as we've talked about. So
and it's not just for people watching who are not from the Aber Valley. It's the same, isn't it? All around the UK, it's the same problems. But yeah, basically, Rich, I think it's brilliant that you are trying to help, these marginalised young men.
Yeah.
I thought your book was really interesting. It's the first book I've ever read. And for any of you who are saying, oh yeah, whatever, you bullshit, there's books all around you, those are all my girlfriends. So actually, if you actually can see properly on that 4K camera there, the detail, they are they're not traditional masculine books then. So yeah, this was the first book I ever read. Yeah, if you haven't read it already, make sure you do. It's really interesting, and Rich has been really interested in it. And like I said, yeah, trying to help these young men maybe see that there is a different way out. There are different opportunities out there. I don't want to kiss your ass too much, but you are living proof of that.
Thank you very much.
Rich.
Thank you.
What's next, Professor? Next or?
That's the goal. That's the goal is Professor. Yeah, but yeah, that's where I'd like to be. But in the meantime, I'll just be concentrating on my focus to hopefully help marginalised young men and groups of marginalised people to succeed in life. Hopefully, Josh.
Yeah, nice one. And last one from me. Make sure to hit that. Everyone says this, every YouTuber. Don't want to be like all the others, but yeah, it's the only way for me to grow. Just hit that subscribe button. Loads of followers on Facebook, but just need to get to 1,000 now on YouTube. Not too far off it. I'm on 700 and something, and then I can get monetization. So yeah, just help me grow with that. And from me and Richard, thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.